Hey everybody, welcome back to We Are Podcast. You're listening to I Hate Being Sober, Season 1, Episode 8, Living with Bipolar, featuring Jonai Richardson. For this one, it's going to be a little bit different. Hopefully you enjoy hearing my voice because you're about to hear a lot of it. If this is your first time listening, please head over to your favorite podcast app, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, or iTunes, and give We Are Podcast a like. Also, if you have a chance, head on over to our social media. All links can be found in the description. And with that, on to the podcast.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to
I Hate Being Sober!
And now our host, Doug!
Hey everybody, welcome to I Hate Being Sober, a podcast about personal stories from epic people. My name is Duck, I am your host, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. An opportunity arose through my work. I am training someone right now to take my place. My replacement is awesome. I will just say that. She's amazing. I love her. Leaving what I was doing in great hands. But an opportunity arose with her best friend to have a conversation today. It was so funny, too, because I was talking about my bipolar disorder with a couple friends and texting and communicating it. And out of nowhere, she said to me, hey, I got a friend who needs to do a term paper. I'm like, ooh, chance to do a podcast. So right now, via Zoom meeting, I have Jonai, right? Is it Jonai?
Absolutely.
Yes. So basically what we're doing, just to explain to everyone, Jonai, this is the first time we've met, first time we've talked, but we're going to have a great conversation. I'm an open book, like I said before. So what is this exactly that you're doing for your school right now?
So basically what I'm doing, I am responsible for introducing bipolar disorder to my classmates. I'm attending St. Leo University, trying to get my master's in social work. It's a pretty difficult disorder to understand, so I'm hoping I can get some understanding from someone who experiences bipolar, just to gain more information and insight.
And I experience it like a motherfucker. That's all I'm going to say. I am crazy. And anyone knows me knows that I am half nuts. For a long time, that was the debate where people would just be like, Duck's just crazy. But the truth is, I have a disorder. I have been diagnosed. So just to let everyone know a little history of this, when I was a child, I was diagnosed with what was called seasonal depression. I don't know if they have that any longer, but that used to be the diagnosis. I'm 35. I was probably 11 when I was diagnosed with that, which I guess basically is just called depression now. Is that correct?
Well, there's still some seasonal. It's more of a specifier compared to a disorder now. So say somebody has major depression or something like that. If it's being affected as the seasons change, then we just consider it a specifier.
And with that, a lot of that comes down to the fact that I have arthritis, which is one of the reasons I moved to Texas from Pennsylvania. I'm originally from Pittsburgh side of Pennsylvania. About 8 years ago, I moved to Texas because I wanted to move towards warm weather to get away from my arthritis. I have a fake hip on my right side. I have something called radial ulnar, which means I can only turn my hands that far. I have arthritis in all four of my limbs, and it is painful like crazy. So I moved south hoping to get away from that. And I've always thought maybe the seasonal depression kind of played into the pain because, as we know, weather can affect that. When I was 22, I believe, I was diagnosed with bipolar 2, which the person who diagnosed me was a quack. So I don't know if that is a proper diagnosis, but I have most of the symptoms of both bipolar 1 and 2. So I'm not sure which one I would actually go under. So this conversation could be good. So with that said, Jonai, begin your questions.
So my first question, I just want to kind of understand the symptoms that you experience. From my understanding, I know there is some symptoms align with mania, feeling excitement, or depression, kind of up and down. And please forgive me if I use any terms that are not appropriate. I'm still learning myself. So I just want to know, what's your experience with bipolar? Are you aware of when you're going to be up and down? Can you feel it coming? What the clinician who diagnosed you, what symptoms did they see? How did they get to their diagnosis and things like that?
The person that diagnosed me, actually, he is in jail right now for very, very bad things that happened. But I'll tell you the story. The man who diagnosed me was one of the two doctors in the psychiatric center in the small town I grew up. And basically, it was just a couple times going in and telling him my symptoms over and over again. I think it was 2 or 3 meetings, which seems kind of quick for a diagnosis of bipolar. But I had seasonal depression for a long time, and along with many other things. So I don't know if I'm misdiagnosed or not, but I will say I have all the symptoms and hallmarks of the condition. With that, I was to be medicated, and medication is a huge issue for me because anytime I have been medicated, I become suicidal. So I am not medicated right now. And when he diagnosed me, he gave me a drug called nortriptyline at the time. And I laughed because I was like, maybe it'll make me trip. And it made me trip to the point where I ended up in a psychiatric hospital because it was so bad. I was hallucinating. Now, we know hallucinations can be a symptom of bipolar disorder as it is. But basically what it came down to is I cycle, and I cycle hard. And when you were asking, do I know when I'm going to go into mania or do I know when I'm going to go into depression? Most of the time. Within the last 6 months to a year, I've become very aware of my cycles. I used to say I'm just Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Dickhead. Like I just would become an asshole out of nowhere. But that's not true because what I do is I cycle, and I cycle pretty hard. Usually it's normal. Like right now, you caught me at a great day because I'm actually going into a manic episode. I started this morning. I realized it this morning because I started going, holy shit, like I feel really good. I feel really, really good. What's going on? And mania, whenever it begins, it's a revving up. It literally is like you're climbing a roller coaster and you're going to the very top and you're ready to just go down that first hill. And I've always described this disorder like that. It's like a roller coaster. You're constantly up and down, which can be very hard to deal with. So whenever I noticed I started going into mania earlier today, I got super excited because I'm fun me when I'm manic. I'm super ecstatic. People love being around me, pure charisma, all the good stuff. When I'm depressed, it is some of the worst shit I've ever dealt with in my life. It is constantly trying to talk myself out of killing myself. So when I go high, I'm buzzing, I'm tingly, I'm talking to everyone. I'm just the life of the party. When I go low, I become a shadow and I crawl into that bed behind you right there and I nap. It's really, really difficult, especially if you're not medicated for it and if you're not regulated for it. So later on, we'll kind of get into my coping mechanisms for that. But what was the second part of the question? I missed something there, I feel like.
No, I was just asking basically what kind of symptoms. I think you hit all the nails on the head. But I was also wondering as you were talking, like, how long are the highs and lows? Like, how long do you experience it?
Right now with my cycle, I was cycling like once a month. And I know that sounds weird to say, but it was kind of like that, maybe less, maybe more. And I would go into a week that was kind of down. So it would be 2 days and then 4 days of utter misery and then 2 days coming back up. And then I'd level out. And then I'd head in slowly into mania. And then it'd be 2 days kind of heading up to it. And then it would peak over that 4-day period, which was fun as shit, and then back down. And so Carrie Fisher, who played Princess Leia in Star Wars, she suffered from bipolar also. I believe it was bipolar. It might have just been depression. But she was a big proponent of mental health. And in a documentary she did, they put out after her and her mother passed away called Debbie and Carrie. Her mother was an actress too. She talked about her disorder and she talked about being the moon and the sun. And that's kind of the way I look at it. When I'm up, I'm the sun, I'm bright, I'm exciting, everyone wants to be around me, I'm the life of the party. And then I cycle back to the earth and then I'm just mellow. I'm right here. Like everything's okay. I feel like a normal human being. Like I don't have these high thoughts. I don't have these low thoughts. And then I consider myself the moon whenever I'm down low. And it's a coping mechanism I've created to kind of deal with it. I know that just like the day, it's going to pass. It will continue to go because just as the sun rises and sets, the moon rises and sets, it will continue. But recently, many things have happened in my life that have changed that cycle. And that's the one thing is it can be triggered, which is terrifying because you never know what's going to trigger it. At the beginning of the year, I had a mental breakdown. And it was very, very difficult for me to deal with that. I literally went to the hospital. I've never had this happen. I had a migraine creep over my head and just hit me. And it was a screaming migraine. And I ended up in the hospital. And it was from stress. I know it was from stress. But since then, and then COVID-19 happening, I'm on like a 2-week to 3-week cycle right now. So it's kind of hard to keep an eye on. Plus, I just got fired, which threw off my cycle completely because I was not expecting that. Right now, I've been real like, where am I in this right now? So it's kind of off big time. But I know I'm going into manic because, like I said, this morning I felt the creeping like, oh, mania's coming on. Oh, okay, right on. Like the only reason we're talking right now really is because I'm manic. And I was like, oh, an opportunity to do a podcast and talk to somebody. And so when you're manic, you feel like you can accomplish anything. It's great to be here and talking, but it's also, you can see how hyper and animated I am. Mm-hmm. This is mania. This is the beginning of mania. That's where we're at on that.
I've read some of the symptoms. I do have minimal information, and I do in one of the books I was reading. It says that sometimes people with bipolar disorder have trouble maintaining employment. Is that something that you experience, or?
No, not for me, because I find repetition and routine being the only thing that saves me from the bipolar. And I tell people this: routine is so important. When I was younger, I didn't know that. I'm real big on doing almost the same thing every day. I'm actually a workaholic. I have 2 jobs, plus I do this podcast channel almost full time. It's almost a third job. I have 3 active podcasts out of 4. We're not doing the D&D right now because we can't, but I have 3 other active podcasts. And those podcasts alone take an hour to 2 to record, depending if we're in person or Zoom meeting. And then it takes 5 to 6 hours to edit, get everything together, and post. So I treat that as a third job. It's a lot of work. But because I have consistency and routines, I can stay healthy in those moments up, down. So when I'm up, I get a lot done. When I'm down, the only thing that keeps me going is the fact that I have deadlines to meet and I have podcasts to do. And so that helps me. So I don't find a problem with keeping a job because I am a creature of habit. So for me, keeping a job isn't difficult, but yes. And I think one of the big reasons people end up losing jobs is the big 3 or 4 bad boys of bipolar. And what happens when people usually suffer from bipolar, especially in a manic episode: drugs, sex, and rock and roll. That's what I call it. But it's technically drugs, sex, and spending money and or gambling. And I count that as rock and roll. So those are 3 of the big ones. I will say that I've struggled with drug use. Everyone knows this on this podcast channel. I have an issue with drugs. I like them, and they're fun. And because of my bipolar, I like to have what I call rainy day drugs. I like to have a cachet of drugs, mainly pills, that I can go to if I need to deal with the lows. Really, that's what it is. Spending money, I'm not rich and I don't have money and I live on my own, so that's never an issue. But yes, I also knew I was manic because I went to Walmart today and wanted to go shopping and buy shit that I didn't need. And I had to stop myself because immediately I was like, oh, I could get that, and that. And I was like, I don't need any of this stuff. The third one is sex. I have not had sex in 3 years almost, so that is not an issue for me because no one is trying to get on this. But if somebody was to text me right now and say, do you want to fuck? I would be there because I'm in a manic episode. So if the opportunity arose, I would take that opportunity. Yes, I know that. The reason people, I think, lose jobs is because those are 3 things that are really crying for your attention, along with gambling, but I don't gamble. That's why I call it rock and roll for that. But those 3 things are always vying for your attention whenever you're in a manic episode. And it's kind of scary because you're trying to feed dopamine with more dopamine. That's the problem. You're already on this high. You're like, how much higher can I fucking take this? As for the lows too, people could lose their jobs there too, because when I'm in my lows, I just want to crawl in that bed and sleep for days. And for me, it is a coping mechanism to do that because when I'm depressed, I hear voices that are not mine. And sometimes also when I'm manic, I hear voices too, but they're usually good. When I'm depressed, I hear super bad voices telling me to kill myself, walk into traffic. I fantasize about getting a gun and putting it to my head, all these thoughts. And Bill Bellamy, amazing comedian who I fucking love. I've been watching him since I was a kid. He talks about in his stand-up, he actually talks about Tony Scott, who was a director, who directed Top Gun. And he said this man had everything he ever wanted in his life, and he killed himself. Why? He had everything. He had money, he had fame, he had fortunes, he had art that he made, he was well respected. Why would he kill himself? And he always jokes, he says, in the Black community, what we know is if you are depressed, if you get that far, take a nap. And I'm telling you right now, when he told me that changed my fucking life. Because when I get depressed, what I do is I go, what's Bill Bellamy always say? And I crawl into bed and I take a nap and see how I feel when I wake up. Because the difference between 5 minutes and 3 hours napping can be the world. And so I always tell Bill Bellamy, because I work at the comedy club, I just say, you saved my life. I just say, see, I'm like, dude, you saved my life. And I appreciate it every day.
And then I do, depressive disorders are quite closely related to bipolar disorders, and it's hard to make a difference in diagnosis. So I'm wondering, there are some biological, genetic, hereditary factors. Is there anyone in your family who suffers from depression or bipolar disorder, or?
Yeah, my father, he does, but he suffers from depression. I've explained to him I think he's bipolar, but he doesn't really want to hear it. He is medicated for it. He has been for a long time. But yes, definitely, it's hereditary because I can look to my family heritage and see all the different things that kind of funneled down to me. And that's a big one. I'm pretty much a spitting image of my father. And he doesn't think that's what it is. But when I explained it to him, he's like, that does sound about right. Because he has been medicated for a long time. But even within the medication, it doesn't always work. And you still have highs and lows, but it helps regulate it the best it can be. But you can still struggle. Yeah, so it's definitely there, and I see it. And my little brother suffers from depression. My older brother is fucking insane. I don't know what he has. He's just crazy, but he probably has everything. I think he has ADHD. But yeah, it definitely trickles down.
And speaking of the medication, what I've been reading up on thus far is like lithium is good for those who respond to it. And I remember earlier you said that you don't really like to do the medication thing. So are there any other coping skills, or how do you deal with it or bring yourself out of that suicidal ideation, or how do you cope or move forward or just deal with the disorder on a day-to-day basis?
Well, lithium is definitely used for it. It's a mood stabilizer, and then they usually top that off with an antidepressant of some sort, Lexapro, Effexor, et cetera, which they wanted to do with me, but there's a serious fear for me of losing the manic highs. And I know that sounds weird, but I enjoy being manic high to the point where the energy you get, the creativity you get, the ability to be charismatic, and just all those things totally flow with that manic high. So what is the give and take? And the other thing, like I said earlier, anytime I've taken medication, I become extremely suicidal because it's experimental. 60 to 90-day trial period. You don't know how the medicine is going to affect you. And the second you start having those thoughts, you need to contact your doctor, which I've been institutionalized twice because of depression for this very reason. And I really don't want to go into a psychiatric center again. It's been a long time since I've done so. There's nothing wrong with that, but I have a life, I have responsibilities I have to take care of. But what's it feel like, too, to feel normal? And this is the problem. A lot of people who suffer from depression or bipolar, they get on medication, it starts to work, and they start to feel good, even keeled, no ups, no downs. And they always say, I feel like a zombie. When you don't feel like a zombie, you're actually normal right now. You're medicated and you're regular. Then they start feeling good. And they're like, wow, I'm doing it. I'm doing great. I think I need to stop taking this medication. No, everyone does it. Don't stop taking your medicine. It's what's regulating you. Why did you stop? So people get in these weird states of minds where they think they're doing it or they can do it because there's a stigma attached to the medication and taking medication, which is very difficult for people. It's very difficult for people to come out and say they have a mood disorder or depression because of the stigma attached to it. And the problem is your mental health is your own responsibility. If you're not going to take care of it, who's going to take care of it? No one. Once they get on the medication, they want to get off it. They don't want people to know they take medicine for that, and they get afraid, and then they get all these self-doubt feelings, or they feel great and they no longer need it. For me, I know I'm rambling right now. This is the manic, if you can't tell. For me, it comes down to I would like to get medicated, but I don't have health insurance, which is a huge deal. How am I going to get medication on a consistent basis? To go on medicine and come off medicine is a trial and error period, and it's very difficult, especially when you come off it for 3 days. That is a nightmare. I have a friend who goes off her medicine. I remind her every day to take her medication at 10:30 in the morning. Every day. I remind her. And I have another friend, too, who I used to remind, but he seems to be doing okay. And if she'd come off her medicine, I can tell within usually 16 to 24 hours the next day that she hasn't taken it. So if she skipped it over the weekend, it's going to be a shitty Monday. If my other friend doesn't take his medication, he becomes a completely different person. But if he's off his medication, I can tell because of his texting habits. He stops texting me, stops talking to me, he cloisters, he becomes reclusive, he starts having homicidal thoughts, which is scary. And when he starts going down that path, I'm like, bro, either you really are feeling that anger or you're depressed, because homicidal thoughts are one of the top 10 traits of suicidal people. And so it becomes very scary. So medication is very, very important for those who need to be taking it, which I probably do too. What was the second question? I'm sorry. I started rambling.
I was just wondering, because you don't medicate, what type of coping skills do you have for the disorder?
Okay, well, once again, I do medicate because I am a drug user. Like I said, I'm very open about that. I have what's called rainy day drugs. So I have a handful of different medications I could go to, which can be also dangerous because it can exacerbate the condition. You never know what drug you put in your system, how that's going to react, especially with the mood or whatever mood you're in. I do take CBD, which is amazing for this. So if you're not taking CBD, definitely go get it. If marijuana was legal, I'd probably smoke it. CBD is very powerful. So it has all the medicinal qualities of marijuana without the high, depending on how much THC is allowed in your area. It's very good for me because it calms down my brain. It's legal here to get it. I don't know if it's legal where you are yet. It is legal here to get it, so I am able to buy that. But it calms me down. One of the big things is my brain races nonstop. It's like boom, 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 boom. CBD kind of just makes me go, all right, I'm good. But the big thing is charting. And this is something I've taught other people who deal with this. Try to chart your cycle. Try to know where you're at in the cycle so you can prep yourself mentally for where you're about to go. Because it is that. If you know you're going into a manic high, know that you're going into a manic high. If you're level, remind yourself every day, hey, listen, if you're in the downswing, this isn't going to last forever, and you're going to hit depression, and it's going to suck. So prepare yourself mentally for that, because when that time comes, you need to have coping mechanisms, and also just to know to tell people around you. That's the other thing, is I prep people around me who matter to me. Not strangers, but the people in my life who mean something to me, to let them know where I am mentally. Because when I'm high, they can tell, because I text and I send paragraphs and chapters. I'm writing books. I want to talk to everyone. I want to talk to people I barely even talk to ever. I texted like 5 people today I barely ever talked to. I haven't talked to in months, or I haven't talked to in years, because I'm manic high. I feel like I'm on top of the fucking world. But when I'm low, I also prep the people around me, because what I find is they think I'm mad at them because I'm depressed. They think that I'm angry, or they said something, or they did something that they upset me. I've literally had to have this conversation with almost everyone. Are you mad at me? No, I'm sorry. I'm not. I'm depressed. And if they push it, I'll be like, listen, I'm dealing with voices in my head telling me to go run into traffic right now because no one loves me. I'm a piece of shit. This world was not meant for me. And I'm constantly doubting myself. I'm like, it's not you. And then those people will come to you with love. And then you feel even more guilty because now you put your burden on them. So I try not to put my burden on others too much, but I do occasionally, just because you have to talk about it. So I only trust those close to me to let them know where I am. And to let them know, yes, I need you to check in on me, because if you don't hear from me within 3 to 6 hours, I mean, you never know.
Hey everyone, it's Duck just jumping in here. First, a disclaimer, the audio did cut out through Zoom meeting, so we will continue the conversation through my podcast setup. I like to be punk rock, and we had to go a little bit punk rock with this. If you're enjoying the podcast today, please head over to your favorite podcast app, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, or iTunes, and give us a like. Also, you can check out our social media. All links can be found in the description: Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at We Are Podcast. With that, back to a slightly different sounding podcast. If things don't work out, you just find another way to do it. So, just so everyone knows, we changed over to my home equipment. Zoom meeting was not working great. So, me and Jonai are going to talk this way and see what other questions you have. So, go ahead, Jonai, whenever you're ready.
I think we left off about treatment as far as educating, well, how you cope and different things you do, because you use, I'll use the term self-medicate. Is that appropriate?
Yes, absolutely.
Rather than the antidepressants and the mood stabilizers. And you also mentioned about educating the people around you so that they can know how to deal with you when you are struggling with your highs and lows. So if you could elaborate a little more about that.
Yeah, so what it is what I do is the people around me in my life have suffered, because you got to think, when somebody's happy all the time in a manic state, people want to be around them. They want to have that energy. They want to have that exuberance. And plus, I'm a very up on people kind of person. I'm very, very positive. And so you go from doting on everyone around you with love, and I'm animated. You saw me on the thing. I have a super animated face. And you go from that and just singing and dancing and like, come on, everybody. It's literally like a party. So you go to this low where you walk in and you don't say anything. Your face is, just very stern. You don't probably even say good morning at that point, because you don't know, you're not in this right state of mind to do so. They feel that you're mad at them, or they feel like they did something wrong or said something wrong. I've had multiple conversations with people who turn to me and go, are you mad at me? What did I do? What did I say? And it hurts them. So by prepping them when I walk in to work, or I walk into a situation, I say, I had a bad day, or I'm depressed right now, it's not you. By letting them know where I'm at mentally, that helps the situation, and it helps their approach to me too, because I'm more sensitive when I'm depressed. When I'm manic, I'm not sensitive at all. You can say whatever the fuck you want to me, and I just like, all right, whatever. But if I'm depressed, it's the exact opposite. If you say something to me that could potentially not even hurt me, I might take it the wrong way, because you got to remember, I got voices in my head telling me I'm useless, everyone hates me, why am I even alive, go run into traffic. I keep going back to that, but those are my two big ones. I hear voices that tell me to go run into traffic and get a gun and blow my brains out. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's a real thing that's happening when I get in those states. And I always say they're voices because they're not my voice. It may sound like something in the back of my head, but it's not my voice. And it's scary. It really is. But yeah.
So I want to ask, it seems like you're like pretty familiar with the symptoms, your highs and lows.
Mm-hmm.
As a future clinician, they do give us an option to provide psychoeducation, and where we give, information to inform the clients about the disorder. So with your familiarity, I'm wondering, does that come from your experience with the disorder? Does that come from like psychoeducation? I know you say you do not have health insurance right now. Are you still able to see a psychiatrist, or, how do you keep yourself educated about the disorder to be able to overcome it or live with it on a day-to-day basis?
I'm pretty familiar with what mine is, and I've done enough of my own research on my own to kind of learn the coping mechanisms and what the cycles are. So that was something that was important. But it's more or less just I'm 35, and I've been dealing with it for so long. And then on top of that, when I get depressed, I'll look up, like, why do I feel this way? It's a reminder. I have to constantly go in and be like, why am I having these suicidal thoughts? There is the hotline if I need it, but I don't want to back that up in case somebody else needs it. And it's just really, I'm telling you, the routine of my everyday life and having a job, a consistency, and having basically 3 jobs to go to is what keeps me together. Because regardless of how I feel, I still have work to do. And so having a goal is very empowering, especially when you're depressed. Well, 3 things. 1, my consistent job has been insurance for the last 5 years, so knowing that I'm needed there by my work family is very powerful. Secondly, I work at a comedy club on the weekends, so that's medication there too. I get to go see comics, some of the best in the industry, for free every week, and being able to see them do their craft and work through it. And getting to be in that environment is very, very, very cathartic and wonderful. And third, I have the podcast. I have my friends who have my back. We have our own chat groups on Facebook. We have constant communication, especially between We Are Error and then the other podcast I do with my friend Ethan. Me and him communicate almost every day. So there's people who rely on me and I rely on them. So that's huge. And that's not what everyone has in this life. Some people have no one. And especially because of this illness, they push people away because people can't deal with the ebbs and flows of it. It's very difficult. It's hard to deal with somebody who, quote unquote, is moody or gets in one of their moods or, they just act like that or whatever. It's hard to stick with them, especially if they don't realize what it is. And so it becomes very, very difficult to keep meaningful relationships. But when you explain to people what it's like, they try to care about it. That makes it easier, because one thing from Corona that we've learned is quarantine and social distancing is no fun. We miss people whether we know them or not, or at least I do. Oh, did I answer the question? I'm sorry.
Yes, sir, absolutely. My next question is, I'm wondering, with you and your experience, what would you tell to a person who is newly diagnosed with bipolar, and what would you tell to a family member or someone who has a family member with the diagnosis?
If I was talking directly to somebody, I had somebody in my life recently who was showing all the symptoms. So with that, she was telling me what she was going through. And I said, you sounds like bipolar to me. It sounds like the exact same thing I have. Verbatim, hit by hit, all the triggers, all the symptoms, everything down the line. And I said, I think that you really need to communicate to your psychiatrist that this is possibly bipolar. And she did not tell me for 3 months that that's what it was. It was really weird because she texted me out of nowhere and she said, listen, I'm struggling. I'm depressed. I don't know what to do. I'm at my wit's end. I'm thinking these thoughts. And I said, well, what's going on? Because it was very out of the blue that she texted me. And she goes, after we had that conversation, pretty soon after that, I got diagnosed. And I've been medicated, but the medication doesn't seem to be working. So she took all the right steps to go where she needed to go, and that's the problem, is the trial and error of medication. And what she started talking about wasn't even that. She's like, what do you think of this medicine? And I was like, okay, why? And because medication's different for every single person. You never know how it's going to react. It's a trial and error basis. But recognizing it and getting over the stigma of it are two huge hurdles in this, because no one wants to be diagnosed with this because there is that stigma attached. I know I keep saying that, but if you say you're bipolar, people will look at you like, whoa, what? Because number one, they don't know what that is. And number two, they've never experienced it. And from the outside looking in, they don't realize, and this is something we talked about too, I can't see it. I'm cognizant of my mood swings, of my cycles, and I can feel them, but it's only happening internally. So what might seem normal to me, to the outside world, looks just so erratic and chaotic. Whenever you're somebody dealing with somebody with bipolar, it's very difficult because you're dealing with these extreme mood swings, and you never know when they're going to hit, and they're just, people start talking crazy. You can hear it right now, I'm rambling like a madman. So how does that viewed from the outside? It's very difficult, especially for somebody who doesn't have the disorder, to categorize it and understand what's going on. And how do you approach somebody who's fighting against it? I don't know. Love and understanding only goes so far, I'm sure. I mean, you could propose it to them and then ask them to do the research and see if it fits. You could present everything to them, but that feels like an intervention, and that becomes dangerous because it feels accusatory. Or just saying, hey, maybe you should talk to your doctor because it's an outside source. I don't know anyone that, other than the person I was talking about, that I had to approach with care, but I'm pretty blunt, so I'm like, this is what it sounds like. And anyone else who I think has suffered from it, I'm like, this is what it sounds like. But a lot of people, they don't want to hear that. They just don't. So I don't have a lot of good advice for that, other than if somebody's diagnosed, I can provide coping mechanisms and I can tell them what not to do. But it really comes down to you can't tell somebody something if they don't want to hear it. No one's going to make a change unless they're ready to make a change, and it has to come from them. So how do you get over that stigma? I don't know. Communication's always there, and you can always kind of introduce it, but you have to do it with kindness. You know, the saying, you catch more flies with honey than you do vinegar. I think there's something to that. But, I mean, it's hard. Recognizing it and actually either being diagnosed or looking at the symptoms and saying, I think I might have this. I need to go get checked out by a doctor. And as for, you were asking earlier about psychiatric care, why I don't go get that. I don't have health insurance. I understand there are free clinics, but the fear of being institutionalized again is stronger because I have so much stuff to do. I don't know what they call it everywhere else. From my understanding, it's called being 302'd. That's what they called it where I was. They told me that they were going to 302 me the last time that they kept, like, you really should really bring yourself in here. You should put yourself in here. I was like, no, I don't want to. Well, you really should. I'm like, and by the third time they said it in such a way of like, if you don't, we're going to put you in here against your will. And I was like, okay. So instead of staying the 30 to 31 days, I only ended up being in there 7, which was much nicer. But it was just to help regulate my medication because I was on bad medication and hallucinating. Now, also, I'm not educated. Are there ways to get help if I need it?
There are, as you mentioned before, the hotline, the suicide hotline. There are free clinics, but it is all circumstantial depending on the area. I do have some resources, and I'm glad that you asked me that question because it makes me take the question further to do some research to see what I can do, what I can offer, and other ways to help.
Absolutely. And what we'll do is when I post this, we'll post it below. And if you have questions, of course, you can reach out to me. I'm more than happy to discuss it with you. And we'll also have links to the suicide hotline, because when you get in that state of mind, if you don't want to talk to a friend, it's okay to call. It is. It really is. I know I said earlier I don't want to call, but that's because I know I'm okay. But if I sincerely thought that I wouldn't be, I would make that phone call. The people on the other side are trained to deal with it, and they will help you through it the best they can. I have a cousin who used to do that. She was on crisis call at all times. It just means she had a cell phone ready to go at any time. Also, yes, I think in DFW there's JPS networks you could go to. I think that they will work with you. I just didn't want to go down that path the last time. And also, I was afraid of the bill. God, I would love some free health care. Can we get that going already? Like, please. Please.
But I will encourage anyone, speak up, speak out to someone, because you never know who might can help, how they may can help. I just highly encourage them to speak up. I know the pride thing, the stigma, culture that's associated with it.
Yeah, it's rough. Did you have any other questions though about anything? I feel like I went through pretty much everything. I really do.
Yeah, you were answering so much that some of my questions diminished because they were getting answered as we were going. But I do appreciate you for your time, and I thank you for allowing me to be a part of your podcast.
Absolutely. This was a blast. So I want to say thank you to everyone for listening today. And if you need to reach out to us, let us know. Otherwise, this has been Duck, and I've been here with Jonai. Thank you so much again.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you so much, Jonai, for having this conversation with me today, for letting me ramble on endlessly in my manic state of mind. I really do appreciate you joining me. If you've enjoyed this podcast today, please head over to your favorite podcast app, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, or iTunes, and give us a like. Also, if you like this podcast, you're going to love the other podcasts here on the We Are Podcast Network. Check out We Are Error, where we talk movies, entertainment, and whatever the fuck we want to talk about. That's me, that's Jake, and that's Javi. We're breaking down that pop culture, and we're having so much fun. Also, We Are Bagu, a video game podcast where we talk Atari to Steam and everything in between. That's me and Dr. Ethan Eastwood talking them games. And don't forget Heroes Gyros, a Dungeons and Distractions side quest. Me and the boys were playing some D&D, and we're having so much fun. Go ahead and start that from the beginning of the campaign. Go back the whole way to episode 1. You're gonna fucking love it. Head on over to our social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at /WeArePodcast. Give us a like, and don't forget to share with your friends. That's the only way we can grow this network. I really do hope you've enjoyed the podcast today. I know it's been a lot of me talking, but with that said, are you sober? Are you? We'll see you next time.